My sister shoved me off a yacht to steal $900 million. When she came home, I was waiting with a gift she never expected. My name is Melissa Carter. I am 36. I grew up outside Boston, where winters were long and the buses were late, and the only way forward was work. Last year, I sold my AI company for $900 million. Headlines called it a dream. I thought it meant safety. I was wrong. The money did not change me. It changed what other people let me see. Reporters asked about vision. Strangers asked about stocks. Family asked about favors. My younger sister, Ashley, asked for time and access. She still had the smile that won classrooms and coaches. I built my company line by line of code and quiet, stubborn hours. I told myself I could lift everyone up. I did not see that some hands would pull me under instead. Then came Ryan, a polished venture capitalist with perfect timing. He said he loved how my mind worked. He said we were a team. He learned my calendar and my mission and my tells. He stood beside me at panels and dinners and late nights when code still mattered. I believed him. I married him in a small ceremony by the water, and I let joy walk through a door that work had guarded for years. Success rearranged my days. Lawyers arrived with binders. Advisors arrived with charts. Invitations arrived from people who once forgot my name. I wrote checks to causes I believed in and kept my circle small. I kept a list of truths on a note by my bed. Love requires evidence. Power tempts everyone. Secrets have gravity. Ashley called more. She said she wanted a real sisterhood. She said she was proud. She learned the rhythms of my house, like she had always lived there. Ryan welcomed her with easy jokes and wine that cost more than my first car. I told myself I was lucky. My husband liked my sister. My sister liked my husband. That is what families hope for. That is what we are taught to want. The night on the water began as a celebration. The sky was clear. Music drifted from the upper deck. The crew served drinks that tasted like summer. Ryan kissed my forehead and told me to relax. Ashley laughed at a story I had not heard. I felt the kind of calm that only visits when you think the climb is over. What followed was not an accident. It was a choice. It was a choice made by the two people who should have been my harbor. I went over the rail. The ocean took me. The dark closed around me like a secret I had not agreed to keep. I counted my breaths and told my body to move. I told my mind to hold on. I told my heart to remember the list by my bed. I did not die. I did not disappear. I did something harder. I waited. When Ashley and Ryan came home, the lights were on. The table was set for 3. In the center sat a box wrapped like a wish. I stood in the doorway and said, "Welcome home." Their faces told me everything about what comes when masks fall. This is how I went from target to witness to architect. This is the start of what I brought them. And this time, I chose the tide. If you are watching this, drop a comment telling me where you are from. Hit subscribe and stay tuned to hear how I finally stood up for myself after years of being the forgotten daughter. I grew up in a modest suburb outside Boston. Our house had peeling paint and a roof that leaked when the storms came. But my parents always smiled when Ashley stepped into a room. She was younger by 3 years, but she carried herself like she had been born to the spotlight. Teachers remembered her laugh. Coaches remembered her charm. Neighbors remembered her beauty pageant ribbons. I worked hard, studied harder, and hoped someone would remember me for more than being her older sister. Mom and Dad did not mean harm, but their eyes glowed when Ashley performed, while my science fair victories earned a nod at best. I spent weekends building code on an old family computer, chasing ideas that only I believed in. Ashley filled the living room with friends and admirers, while I filled notebooks with algorithms. I told myself we were different paths to the same goal. But deep down, I knew hers was paved in applause, while mine was silent. By the time I turned 20, my life was a cycle of work and school. I waited tables at night, wrote code in the morning, and studied every gap in between. Ashley called from college, crying about bills she could not pay. I sent her money I could not spare. She promised she would return the favor someday. She never did. One night, she was arrested for a DUI. My parents never knew. I covered it, drained my savings, and told the officer I would keep her in line. I thought I was saving her future. Instead, I handed her a weapon she would one day use on me. Years later, when my startup was still fragile, Ashley cornered me with that secret. She said she needed money again. She smiled the way she did when we were kids and told me I would not want anyone to hear about her mistake. She called it family loyalty. I called it blackmail. I paid her anyway. I told myself it was the last time. It never was. I built walls of work to keep myself steady. Code did not lie. Numbers did not twist. Success was proof that I had value. Investors ignored me at first, but I kept writing, kept pitching, kept showing up when doors closed. Ashley was chasing modeling gigs in New York, too short for the runway, too stubborn to quit. Every time she failed, she called me. Every time I struggled, I stayed silent. I thought sacrifice was love. I thought patience was virtue. I thought family meant safety. But secrets have gravity. That night I covered for her DUI was not forgotten. It sat between us like a shadow. When she came to visit years later, she looked around my apartment and laughed. She said it looked like a dorm room. She said, at least I had brains, because looks would never carry me. I swallowed the sting and told myself it was just Ashley being Ashley. I never let myself ask why I kept paying for her life when she never once invested in mine. As my company started to grow, Ashley's calls came more often. She wanted vacations, shopping trips, little loans that never came back. She wanted me to remember that one secret night. She wanted to remind me I owed her. I did not know then how deep that debt would cut. One evening, she called with a tone I had not heard before. She said Ryan had been asking her questions about me. She laughed and said it was harmless, but the way she paused, the way her voice lingered, made my chest tighten. I wondered if I had just heard the first echo of a trap. I remember the first time success felt real. It was not the headlines or the investors. It was sitting in my cramped apartment with a glowing laptop screen, watching an algorithm finally work the way I dreamed it could. That code became the foundation of the company I built, and 3 years later, it sold for $900 million. I thought it meant freedom. I thought it meant security. What it really meant was exposure. Investors called me a genius. Reporters asked if I had cracked the secret of artificial intelligence. Strangers online argued whether a woman could have done this without help. Through it all, Ryan appeared. He was tall, polished, confident in ways I was not. He said he admired my brain. He said he wanted to protect me from people who would take advantage. He made me feel seen in a way the spotlight never did. Ryan pursued me like I was a prize he could not let slip. Flowers at my office, invitations to dinners where he knew the waiters by name, conversations where he listened as if my words carried weight. I told myself I was too busy, too focused for love, but his persistence wore down walls I thought were permanent. 8 months after we met, we were married on a quiet stretch of the California coast. Ashley stood beside me as maid of honor, her tears shining in the sun. She whispered that I deserved happiness. I believed her. The wedding should have been a new chapter. Instead, it was the first crack. During our honeymoon in Hawaii, I overheard Ashley on the phone late at night. She laughed and said Ryan was too good for her sister. The words burned. I stood in the hallway, frozen, listening to her voice float through the half-open door. My chest pounded. I could have walked in. I could have demanded answers. But I did nothing. I told myself it was a joke, just Ashley being careless. Still, the silence I chose that night would haunt me. Why did I let it go? Fear of losing the fragile bond we had rebuilt. Fear of facing the truth too soon. I will never know. What I do know is that moment gave both of them permission. They thought I would never fight back. Ryan became part of every piece of my life. He attended board meetings, offered business advice, charmed my colleagues. At first it felt supportive. Later, it felt invasive. He asked about my passwords. He suggested becoming an officer in the company. He smiled when I hesitated, as if to say he understood. But in his eyes, I caught a flash of coldness before it disappeared behind charm. I brushed it aside. I told myself love was messy, that marriage required trust. I ignored the warning because I wanted the story of us to be true. Ashley drifted in and out of my home with the same ease she had in childhood. She poured wine, curled up on the couch, laughed at Ryan's jokes. They shared a rhythm I did not understand. I told myself it was good that they got along. I told myself family meant blending lives. But sometimes I would walk into a room and their laughter would stop too quickly. Their glances would shift too slowly. I told myself to stop imagining shadows. Yet shadows were already growing in the corners of my life. One evening, Ryan leaned close during dinner and said he had a surprise planned. A trip, a celebration of everything we had achieved. He smiled as if it was romance. Ashley's eyes lit up too brightly when she heard. Something inside me twisted. A warning I could not yet name. Ryan's surprise trip stayed on my mind. But what unsettled me more was how often Ashley was already at our penthouse. She said she was figuring out her next career step, that she just needed space to think. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe Ryan. But every time I saw them lean together, whispering, laughing in half-finished sentences, my stomach told me there was more. I started paying closer attention. Ryan's texts grew shorter. His business trips grew longer. He locked his phone when I walked into the room. At first, I told myself marriage goes through phases, but doubt is like rust. It starts small and then eats everything it touches. That was when I hired a private investigator. His name was Mark, a man who did not waste words. 3 days later, he sat across from me with a folder. Ryan had a history: failed investments, debts, bankruptcies hidden behind polished suits and rehearsed smiles. Before me, his finances were a house of cards, ready to collapse. I stared at the photos of old court filings and asked myself if I had ever truly known the man I married. Ashley was not clean either. Credit cards maxed out. Cash deposits into accounts she could not possibly afford. Something connected them, something beyond family. One night, while Ryan was in the shower, I walked past his study and saw his laptop open. Emails filled the screen. Transfers, discussions of offshore banks. Ashley's name right there in black and white. My heart slammed in my chest. I could have taken a photo. I could have copied the files. Instead, my hands froze. Fear told me to close the lid before he returned. So I did. I shut the proof and walked away. Even now, I hear people ask why. Why not act then? Why not run to the police? The truth is simple. I was scared of being wrong, scared of detonating my life if suspicion turned out to be paranoia. That fear cost me more than I knew. Days later, Mark called again. He had something new. Ashley and Ryan had rented an apartment together under fake names. The lease was months old. They had built a life behind my back while I was still pretending everything was fine. I remember sitting in the dark that night, replaying every smile, every toast, every casual touch between them. The pieces fit together too neatly. My sister and my husband had secrets worth killing for. I installed hidden microphones in the house under the cover of upgrading our sound system. I told Ryan it was for smart home features. He smiled and said he loved when I embraced new tech. He had no idea the walls were about to start talking. I ask myself now what I should have done. Should I have confronted them that night with the lease in my hand? Should I have left the house and never looked back? Or was waiting the only way to know for sure? Ryan said it like a gift. He leaned across the table and told me we were going to the Florida Keys. A yacht, a celebration, 2 weeks to ourselves. Ashley's smile was instant. She said she had always dreamed of sailing that coast. Ryan answered before I could. He told her she should come with us. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I forced a smile. Of course, I said. It would be fun. I had 6 days to prepare. While Ryan and Ashley planned cocktails and playlists, I created backups. I transferred money into an account he did not know about. I activated GPS trackers on my devices. I bought a waterproof pouch, a satellite phone, and clothing that could survive more than leisure sailing. I told myself I was paranoid. I told myself maybe they were only greedy, not murderous. Still, I packed for survival. The yacht gleamed under the Miami sun when we boarded. 80 feet of white luxury. Crew members welcomed us with champagne flutes. Ryan wrapped his arm around me, like he was proud. Ashley kissed my cheek and whispered how happy she was that I invited her. Every gesture looked perfect. Every smile was poison. For 3 days, nothing happened. We swam in blue water. We ate meals prepared by the chef. We played cards late into the night. The crew hovered nearby, unaware that I was living with predators in silk clothes. I started to wonder if I was wrong. On the 4th night, Ryan suggested giving the crew the evening off. He said we could manage one dinner by ourselves. Ashley chimed in, insisting they deserved rest. The captain agreed. When the crew retreated below deck, I felt the air change. The ocean outside was endless. The house lights on shore were gone. We were alone. Ryan mixed cocktails on the upper deck. He handed me a glass with a slice of pineapple. "Try this, babe," he said. "Strong, just the way you like it." I raised it, but when his back turned, I tipped the liquid down the side. My lips curved into a smile. "Delicious," I murmured. Minutes later, I pretended to sway. My words slurred. My body slumped against his shoulder. Ryan guided me down to the cabin, his grip tight, too eager for a man pretending to care. He laid me on the bed, checked my eyes, whispered that I should sleep. He locked the door behind him. I waited, counting breaths, until I heard footsteps return. The lock clicked. Ryan's voice was low. "Is she out?" Ashley asked. "Completely," Ryan said. "The sedative would drop a horse. She will not wake." They stood over me, planning how to move me. They wanted it to look like I stumbled, like I fell by accident into black water. I opened my eyes. "Looking for something?" I asked. Their faces twisted in shock. Ashley's voice dripped with venom. "You were always one step ahead, always so perfect." Ryan moved closer. "This changes nothing," he said. "No one will hear you scream." Ashley blocked the door. Ryan lunged. I fought, kicked, broke free for a second. but his hand caught my hair, dragging me toward the rail. I clawed, begged, looked into Ashley's eyes. For a moment, I thought she might stop. Instead, she leaned close and whispered, "Say hello to the sharks." Then, her hands shoved my chest. I fell. The last thing I saw was Ryan smiling as the ocean opened beneath me. The water hit like concrete. My lungs seized. Salt burned my nose and mouth as the waves swallowed me whole. I kicked upward, arms thrashing, until I broke the surface with a gasp. The yacht was already pulling away, its engines a roar in the dark. Ryan and Ashley stood above like shadows, carved from glass, watching me sink into nothing. Panic clawed at my chest. I forced it down. I had been a swimmer in college. Not a champion, but strong enough to know technique could outlast fear. I flipped to a backstroke, keeping my mouth above water, conserving energy. The ocean stretched endless and black. Every sound became a question. Was that a current? Was that a fin? Minutes blurred into hours. My muscles shook. My teeth rattled. I remembered a team-building retreat years earlier where an ex-Navy SEAL taught survival. He said the mind quits before the body. Last one more minute, then another. Break it down. That was what I did. I whispered to myself, one more breath, one more stroke. The night broke into gray morning. My skin was raw, my lips cracked. I thought of Ashley whispering to me before the shove. I thought of Ryan's smile. Rage burned hotter than the cold. I promised myself I would not die here, not give them that victory. By midday, I spotted debris bobbing on the waves. A seat cushion, pale against the blue. I swam to it, clung to it, let my arms rest for the first time in hours. The sun beat down, replacing cold with thirst. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. My skin felt like fire. Still, I held on. As evening painted the horizon, I heard it. A low hum. A motor. I jerked upright, waving the cushion, screaming until my throat tore. At first, I thought it was a dream. But then a small fishing boat cut across the water. Two men stared at me as if I were a ghost. They pulled me aboard, wrapping me in a blanket that smelled of salt and diesel. The older one introduced himself in broken English as Captain Luis Rivera. His son Marco handed me water in small sips. I tried to speak. My voice cracked. "Yacht," I managed. "Fell overboard. Accident." That was the word I chose. Accident. It was a lie, a deliberate one. I could have told them the truth. I could have begged them to call the authorities. But instead, I swallowed the words. If Ryan had connections here, if Ashley found out I lived, they would try again. Better to be presumed dead. Better to plan. Luis and Marco exchanged glances. They knew my story was thin. But kindness outweighed questions. They nursed me through the night as the boat headed for shore. The next morning, Luis leaned close. He said Ryan's name. He told me years earlier a foreign man had come asking about smugglers, about routes with no patrols. His eyes were hard. Was it the same man? He asked. I turned away, but my silence was answer enough. That night, as the boat neared land, I stared into the dark waves. I should have been at the bottom of this ocean. Instead, I was alive, hidden, and burning with resolve. Ashley and Ryan thought they had erased me. They had no idea I was already writing the next chapter. From a safe hotel room, under a false name, I built my return. Jane, my loyal assistant, managed secure communications. Olivia, a cybersecurity expert, recovered deleted messages. Mark, the investigator, dug through Ryan's past. Theodore, my lawyer, shaped a legal net to hold them when the time came. Piece by piece, we collected proof. Emails plotting my death, records of fraud, offshore accounts. I did not just want survival. I wanted truth no one could deny. That was when the idea came to me. If they had planned my end on a yacht, then I would stage their reckoning in my own home. The penthouse I had designed became a stage for justice. We moved in silence. Contractors installed hidden cameras disguised as upgrades. Locks were rewired to obey me alone. In the dining room, I set a table for 3. Fine china and crystal glasses filled with wine. At the center sat a box wrapped in silver paper. Inside was everything: recordings, financial records, warrants signed and ready. My gift to them. On the night of their return from Europe, I entered through a private service door. The place smelled different, like perfume that was not mine. Ashley's clothes hung in my closet. Ryan's cufflinks lay beside her jewelry on my vanity. They had replaced me before the salt had left my skin. Near midnight, headlights flashed across the drive. I watched on the feed as they stumbled inside, laughing from champagne. Then they froze. The lights were on. Music drifted through the house. Jazz. Ryan once said he loved. He moved carefully, pulling Ashley close as if protecting her. They followed the sound into the dining room and stopped cold at the sight of the table. Ashley whispered, "What is this?" That was my cue. I stepped from the shadows in the same black dress I wore the night of the yacht. "Welcome home," I said. Their faces drained of color. Ryan staggered back. Ashley covered her mouth, eyes wide. "You are dead," Ryan stammered. "We saw you drown." "You saw me fall," I answered. "You assumed the ocean finished me. That was your mistake." Ryan's mask cracked. Then he tried again. "Thank God you are alive, Melissa. It was a terrible accident. We can explain." "Stop." I cut him off. "I know about the will. I know about the money. I know about every lie. Open the box." Ryan's hands shook as he lifted the lid. The sight of the evidence bent his posture like a broken hinge. Emails, bank transfers, the recording of their whispers in the cabin. Ashley gasped. "This is not real," she hissed. I pressed a button on my phone. The doors locked with a heavy click. "The police are outside," I told them, "and the FBI. They were waiting for my signal." Ryan's face twisted. He grabbed the edge of the table and flipped it toward me, glass shattering across the floor. From his jacket, he drew a gun I had never seen. "You think you can outplay me," he snarled. "If I am going down, you are coming with me." I stood, unarmed, my heartbeat hammering, knowing this was the moment I might pay for every choice I made. The moment Ryan pulled that gun, time fractured. I remember the weight of silence before the chaos, my breath frozen in my throat. He aimed with steady hands, eyes locked on me, as if he had finally stripped away every mask and revealed the predator underneath. Ashley screamed his name, but her voice wavered between fear and desperation. I had no weapon, no shield, nothing except the plan I had crafted in secret. I thought that might be the last mistake of my life. Before he could fire, the dining room door burst open. Federal agents surged in, weapons raised, voices commanding him to drop it. The sound rattled the crystal still clinging to the table. Ryan spun toward them, but he was too late. They tackled him hard, the gun clattering across the floor. I remember the look in his eyes, still calculating, still searching for another move, even as they pinned his arms behind his back. For a man who lived by manipulation, surrender was unthinkable. Ashley collapsed where she stood. Tears streaked her face, her body trembling, her words tumbling out fast. She pointed at Ryan, sobbing that it had all been his idea, that he had pressured her, that she never wanted me hurt. But her voice betrayed her. She had whispered to me on that yacht, told me to greet the sharks. That was no pressure. That was choice. I watched her try to rewrite the past, and I felt a hollow calm settle inside me. They were both taken that night, one cursing, one pleading, both undone. I stood in the ruins of my dining room, glass glittering like shattered stars across the floor, and felt the strangest sensation. Freedom. Not triumph, not joy, just release. The nightmare I had carried since the shove off the yacht was finally over. The trial began months later, the courtroom buzzing with media and whispers. I walked in with my head high, wearing a navy suit. Nothing flashy, nothing fragile. Ryan sat at the defense table, glaring, his rage undimmed. Ashley avoided my eyes, her face pale, hands clenched together. The evidence was overwhelming. Emails, bank transfers, recordings of their own voices, a story too complete to deny. Their lawyers fought hard, but truth was heavier than their lies. The verdict came swift. Ryan was sentenced to life without parole for attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. Ashley received 20 years, the court recognizing her role while granting some leniency for cooperation. I sat through sentencing without flinching. When Ashley finally looked at me, her eyes were a storm of regret and longing for forgiveness. I gave her nothing, not hate, not grace, only silence. Some bonds, once broken, cannot be repaired. Life after the verdict was not simple. Returning from the dead meant paperwork, undoing certificates, reopening accounts, reclaiming my name. Theodore guided me through it all. But even with his help, the process was exhausting. Yet every signature felt like one step further from the woman who had been pushed into the ocean. I moved into a new apartment overlooking the bay, modern and open with walls of glass. I wanted light. I wanted transparency. I wanted to erase the shadows of secrets. Still, nights were difficult. Dreams of waves closing over me jolted me awake. Therapy became part of my survival. Not weakness, but discipline. Dr. Ramirez reminded me that betrayal by family leaves scars deeper than wounds to the body. Healing would be long, uneven, but possible. From that struggle came purpose. I founded the Phoenix Foundation, named for the fire that rises after ashes. Its mission was to help people trapped by betrayal. Legal support, therapy, emergency funds. The first time a young woman walked into our office with tears in her eyes and left with hope in her step, I knew the pain I carried had found meaning. 2 years later, I returned to the sea, not on the Azure Dream, not on anything gilded, but on a modest charter boat. Jane stood beside me, her loyalty unshaken. In my hand, I carried 12 white roses, one for each month of recovery. I dropped them one by one into the waves where I had once fought for my life. They floated away, a trail of memory and release. The last rose I held longer. It was for the woman I used to be. The one who trusted too easily, who thought love was protection. She was gone, but I honored her before letting her drift into the tide. As the sun broke the horizon, I felt peace at last. Not the peace of forgetting, but the peace of surviving and choosing to live again. Betrayal had broken me, but it had also remade me, stronger, sharper, alive. And now I turn the question to you. What would you have done in my place? Would you have stayed silent on the honeymoon, closed the laptop, lied to the fisherman, walked into that dining room unarmed? Every choice I made still sparks debate, but they are the choices that brought me here. Tell me your story. Tell me how you would have fought, because every answer is part of the survival we all share.